Entergy doesn't just power the moment, we power the future. So we're continually improving the grid to provide reliable and affordable power for generations to come. Together, we power life. Entergy.
We'll fill the trunk so you don't have to empty the car. With H-E-B Curbside and Delivery, our expert shoppers do the shopping for you, so you save time and money. H-E-B Curbside and Delivery.
On behalf of the Tribune, I'm delighted to welcome you to our 8th annual Texas Tribune Festival and to Speakers Speak with these guys, who I'll introduce in just a minute. This panel is supported by AT&T, CenterPoint Energy, Encore, H-E-B, and Entergy. Although the corporate sponsors and donors underwrite the event, they play no role in determining the panel's content, the panelists, or the line of questioning. I'm not sure any of us would have cleared that bar anyway. We're going to talk the whole thing for about 60 minutes. It will include 15 to 20 minutes for your questions, and there will be microphones in the audience when we do it. It's a small room. We might be able to just shout at each other. Let me remind you to turn off your phones or to silence them. If you want to tweet during this thing, the hashtag is TribFest, hashtag TribFest18. Let me introduce my panelists, and we'll jump into this thing. We'll start here. We'll start there, actually, at the end. Ben Barnes served as Lieutenant Governor of Texas from 1969 to 1973. He's the youngest person to hold the office. Before his election as Lieutenant Governor, he served as the youngest Speaker of the Texas House of Representatives from 1965 to 1969. After leaving office, he worked as a real estate developer and formed a government affairs consulting group. Pete Laney is a Democrat, or was a Democrat from Hale Center. I guess he still is a Democrat, still from Hale Center. Served in the Texas House of Representatives from 1973 to 2007. In 1993, he was elected unanimously as Speaker of the Texas House, serving until 2003. And until now, that was the last time we had an open seat contested speaker's race, until now. During his tenure, Laney served as chair of the House Administration and State Affairs Committee. And in the program, if you look at the program for the Tribune Festival, it says he is a practicing attorney and the founder of the law offices of J. Pete Laney, which was a surprise to his son, who's an attorney named J. Pete Laney. So we'll just duck that one. I'll blame a copy editor somewhere. Tom Craddick is a Republican from Midland. He's still in the legislature, a state rep now. He served there since 1969. From 2003 to 2009, he served as the first Republican Speaker of the House since Reconstruction. Craddick serves on the House Energy Resources and State Affairs Committees. He is the owner of Craddick Properties, a Midland-based investment business, and we'll find out in a minute if he's one of the 149 members of the Texas House who looks in the mirror every morning and thinks he's looking at the next speaker. Gib Lewis is a Fort Worth Democrat. He served in the Texas House from 1971 to 1993. He served 5 terms as Speaker of the House from 83 to 93. During his tenure, he served as chair of the House Intergovernmental Affairs and Natural Resources Committees. He currently serves as a legislative consultant and a lobbyist in Austin. This is billed as 4 former leaders of the Texas House on how this has changed the politics of winning and keeping it, and whether the power of the gavel has grown or waned. I want to start with the speaker's race. And one way into this, as everybody knows, Joe Strauss is not running again. Like I said, there's 149 people who considered it or at least looked at it. Just briefly, how did you get elected? I want to talk about how the speaker's races have changed, how the power of the office has changed, how the stature of the office has changed. But Mr. Barnes, you want to start? Just a brief version of this. What was the speaker's race like when you did this?
My freshman term in the House, there was a very bitter speaker's race between James Turman from Bonham and Wade Spillman from McAllen. And there were 4 members of the House who had double pledged. Then we had pledge cards, and I'm sure these fellows may or may not have used pledge cards, but we had pledge cards, and so no one really knew until the next day after the day we were all sworn in who was going to be Speaker. and Jimmy Terman won. The House was very divided. It's a little bit like the United States Congress, as we saw yesterday on national television. It wasn't quite that bad, but I remember 3 members picking up the Speaker's chair that he was sitting in and moving him down off the podium, which was and I remember Bob Johnson hitting another member of the House, and it knocked him all over the press table and knocked out about 2 members of the press. He couldn't get all 25 of them, but he got 2 of them.
Probably a good idea, right?
But it was then a speaker's race developed, and I was running for my 2nd term without an opponent, and I helped Byron Tunnell, who became speaker. And strangely enough, a fellow that was going to go on to be lieutenant governor one day, Bob Bullock, said to me, I went to Bullock, he was Tunnell's very good friend, and I said, there's a couple of members that won't pledge Tunnell, but they'll give me a pledge card for speaker. And he said, well, you take those pledge cards, and you just put on that pledge card with Byron. As long as Byron Tunnell's speaker, you're not running. But if he steps down, that you want their pledge card. And so I thought that was a pretty good idea, and so I started doing that with a lot of the members. And lo and behold, Byron had an opportunity to become railroad commissioner, and there was a speaker's race broke out overnight. But I had 100 votes, and so the speaker's race didn't last very long. But it was a very bitter fight, a very important. The speaker's gavel has a lot of power and influence, and I think probably that there's been some really interesting speakers races throughout the last 150 years that people don't really know about, but because of the office having so much power, it's a very interesting political jungle.
Let's just go in order of that you became speaker. How'd your race go? Was it the same kind of a deal, or? Well,
similar to that. If you reflect back on it, it seemed like it was not as bitter as some of them had been. Billy Clayton was speaker before I was, and
right.
And I had never planned on running for speaker. And in fact, I had a dinner with my committee staff and told them I was going to get out of the legislature. And a couple of them said, "Well, everybody thinks you're going to run for speaker." I said, "I don't know where they're getting that idea." And so, after a few glasses of wine, I said, "Well, I'll check into it and see." And so
how great decisions were made, right?
I told them, I'm going to talk to 3 different people. And the first person I talked to was Billy Clayton, who was the speaker. I said, "Clayton," I said, "here's what the deal was." And I said, "What do you think?" He said, "I think it's a great idea." He said, "You ought to do it." And I said, "Really?"
How many people you think he told that?
Huh? I don't know. Well, I hope only me. But because he was always very supportive of me, and I was very supportive of him also. And then I had 2 more people I wanted to talk to. I said, if one of them tells me no, I'm not going to do it. Of course, one of them was a guy named Hamp Atkins, which I really liked Hamp. He was a member from East Texas, and I thought he would be a good speaker, and I always kind of looked up to him as maybe being the future Speaker of the House. And I went to him. I said, "Hamp," I said, "I don't know if you're thinking about it, but if you are thinking about running for Speaker," I said, "I'm going to support you. I just want you to know." And I said, "But if you're not," I said, "I'm thinking about throwing my hat in the ring." And he said, "Well, I'm not going to run." I said, "I'll support you too." And so I got all 3 people supporting me. I said, "I think I'll do it." So I made the announcement and got in an airplane and went to 140-something different districts and spoke to every person out there. But it was during the interim, so it wasn't during the session. And so, which was good, because it gave me an opportunity to meet some of these guys, the members, people, constituents. And when I did become speaker, it would really play dividends, because I knew every district, knew what their wants and concerns were, and it helped quite a bit. So Charlie Evans and I got in his airplane, and we went to all over the state.
How many people were in that speaker's race? How many candidates?
I
mean, how many people were really in that speaker's race?
I think about 4 or 5.
Okay.
And of course, we won a session, as Speaker Laney can tell you. I think we won a session there where I had the votes, and everybody knew it. So I mean, it wasn't really a race, but there were about 3 or 4 people, Pete, that were kicking the can at that point. But it was not all that much of a contest.
Okay. And when you left, when Laney became speaker, that was a big noisy race, and it's the one that, you know, a lot of people think about and talk about when they're talking about the current race, where there's an open seat and there's, you know, pretty good hash fight. It was 4 or 5 serious candidates.
Yeah, there was me and Jim Rudd and David Kane and 2 or 3 more.
James Urey and
James Urey,
right.
And it developed into, because, you know, Jim and I were in school together and were good friends, but it was a pretty cordial deal, because most of the individuals that supported him, when I got close to having the votes, or when I had enough, they all came and were very supportive.
Right. So
it was an interesting time.
Well, it's you know, there's a funny thing about speakers races is that they're all, you know, when you go back and you look at how did so and so get in, it's almost always unanimous, or it's, you know, unanimous to one holdout or something like that. But it's, you know, it's not quite that. I think at one point in your race, somebody on the Rudd team showed me the votes they thought they had. Somebody on your team showed me the votes, and I counted, I think, 183 House members.
That's
well, that was conservative, because normally about 200 members.
And I think Kane said he had 12. So, you know, there were a couple hundred people on that end of the legislature.
Yeah, it's really interesting to who some of those people were and how they
double and triple
pledged.
Right.
But you knew most of them.
Yeah. Mr. Craddick, how'd yours go?
Well, mine was interesting, but I'll tell you, the first speaker's race I got involved in was Billy Clayton's. And I got to tell you, when I was dating Nadine, she was in Lubbock and I was in Austin, and I'd ride with Pete and Billy they'd drop me off in Lubbock when we go home. I don't know if you remember, we're on our way to Lubbock one day, and this is my first venture in the speaker's race. We're in an airplane up in the air, and they said, Pete says, Clayton's thinking about running for speaker. We'd like you to pledge for. I looked out the window. I thought, this might be a good time to sign that pledge.
look for your parachute.
So that was my first involvement in the speaker's race. But anyway, mine was different in that the legislature was who got control, whether the Republicans or Democrats at that point. The Democrats had control through all of their speakers' races. I'd done like both of them had done. I went and worked every member that was running. I remember in one race there were 7 people in the primary, and I had a pledge card from all 7 of them. So it was waiting to see, you know, who won the primaries for me, and then it was who got control of the legislature that night. And we found out, I don't know, it was like 2, 3 in the morning or something like that the Republicans had gotten control. And at that point, I had enough votes to get elected.
So that was election night, kind of determined.
Right. So it was. I didn't know till the next morning whether or not there'd be a chance to get elected. So that's how it happened.
I got out a piece of paper the other day and figured out from Clayton's beginning to now, he had 4 terms. Lewis and Laney had 5 terms, 3 for you, 5 for Strauss. So we've had those speakers. If we had been on the old system, when speakers served for 1 or 2 terms and then left, that would have been 11 speakers during that period. And I'm curious what you guys see as the change. Is it a different kind of a vote if you're a member of the House and you're voting for a speaker for 2 terms, and if I lose this race, well, I'm only out of the box for 2 terms, and I get another crack at this, than it is if I'm voting and whoever I elect may be here for 6 or 8 or 10 years. Is that a different proposition in the speaker's race? Does that change the dynamics of this?
Well, the change was when we went to 4-year terms for statewide office holders, because before, speakers like Governor Barnes went to lieutenant governor from the speaker's office, and others left the speaker's office to go do something else. When you're in the speaker's office for as long as some of us were, you don't cultivate too good a statewide image just to
get too many bruises.
Yeah, get too many bruises.
I think you're right, though, to some respect. You get elected speaker and you appoint your committees, and so it's hard to move unless you create new committees. I mean, people may shift around. You may shift chairman or something, but it's hard to to get rid of chairman or something like that, unless through attrition and they don't run or get beat or something like that. So I think it's a difficult thing.
Is it more pressure on members? I mean, if you're voting and you want to be, you get the sense watching it from outside, and this may be wrong, I get the sense watching it from outside that members are looking at this and they want to land with the winner eventually. They'd like to have their first choice, but they want to land with the winner, and winning with, landing with a loser. A great example of this is Rick Williamson, who was really tight with Jim Rudd and was kind of, in the middle of things, and then when Laney became speaker, he was not in the middle of things.
Well, I still put him on the Appropriations Committee.
Right, just not in the middle.
Just not the chairman, I think, is
Just watch their poker faces while they're
let me follow up on that. The problem you have too is the reason you stay as long as Laney and I and Speaker Craddick is your membership likes stability.
Right.
And I know I was trying to get out after 3 terms, and I thought 3 terms, in which I still say 3 terms is all a speaker can handle, really, because after the 3rd term you lose your mobility and your enthusiasm, and it becomes a job after that. And I know I was trying to get out, and members said, we can't do that.
6 years of fun, and then it's all downhill from there.
Yeah, and so anyhow, that's the problem you got, I think, is the membership likes stability. They don't like a speaker's race. They want the stability in the House and the Senate, wherever. And that was the problem I had on trying to get out, is trying to, let me out of here. I've had all the fun I can handle.
Ross, right now in the speaker's race that's going on, you've got multiple people that are running that are announced, and multiple people that are running that haven't announced. But anyway, you've got out there, and they're all talking about different things they're for or against. And one of them is the number of terms they'll run. That's a big factor out there right now. I've heard 2, 3, 4, from different people.
Right.
And as somebody else comes out, pretty soon we're going to run for 1 session and quit, and right afterwards you can during the interim. But seriously, that's a big factor right now.
Well, one of the things I'm curious about is if you're running 2 terms, aren't you a lame duck in some ways the first day? I mean, everybody's like, Barnes won this race, but in a minute we'll have another speaker's race, so I'm going to keep all my options open. And I mean, was that different, or did they just sort of like elect them and then leave
Ross, it was a little different in my case because I think it was known to the House members that I had other ambitions, and that even though that I wasn't running for speaker, I was running to go across the hall. And so those House members were not anxious to not be acquainted with the Lieutenant Governor, and so that it kept a lot of people interested in following my leadership or lack thereof in the House. There wasn't a drop off of the fact that I was a lame duck.
Right. They thought you might still be able to hurt them.
Yeah.
Or
help them. Or help them.
I think that is right. I think
Yeah.
if you're a lame duck, you make your committee appointments, and then what?
Right. Where in your terms did the next speaker's race start? I'm just curious about, we've seen in the last 2 terms really of Joe Strauss. I mean, he's won, with, like on election day, prohibitive votes. But to your point, after his 3rd term, the noise started getting louder. Started being a little bit more of a, running was more of a proposition. It became a little bit more dangerous in some ways to keep supporting Strauss for some people in some situations. When in your term did you start seeing sort of the leaves are rustling out there, people are disquieted?
I tell you, when it starts is the day you announce that you're not running for re-election.
Right.
And that, I noticed that
it didn't start
on Laney. But I tell you what, the minute I announced, which I announced during the session, that I would not be coming back.
I remember.
And I think the next day or that night it
Probably
all started.
that
That night it started.
Is that when he started, or is that when you knew he started?
Well, that might be a good point to make.
Right.
No, I was. Gibb made me chairman of State Affairs, and I was loyal to him.
Yeah. Let me. A couple of you, I guess all of you, went through a bunch of speakers. Has the power of this office, has the nature of this office changed? Mr. Barnes, I'll start with you because you had both the speaker's job and the lieutenant governor's job, and I guess at that time the lieutenant governor's job was probably still is by some people, considered the most powerful job in the legislative branch, and maybe in state government, just because the way the power goes back and forth with the governor. Has the Speaker's office, is it as powerful as it was, or more powerful? How do you characterize it?
Well, I'm not a day-to-day observer of the Speaker's office as I once was, but I think the Speaker's office has retained the power. The House has changed, and Texas has changed. I mean, you got to understand that when I was Speaker, there were maybe two. Maybe Speaker Craddick can tell me, but I'm not too sure. There was only 2 Republicans in the House when I was Speaker, and when I was
I think there was 3 when I.
And then when I was Lieutenant Governor, there was only 1 Republican that was in the Senate. So it was different. The Democrats were divided, but we didn't have the floor fights that I noticed Gil and Tom and Pete had. That I was very fortunate in that we had a program. And John Conley was governor. John Conley was a person who'd been outside of Texas and came back with a lot of vision. We were doing a lot of things. Matter of fact, we passed a tax bill every session, and that would be taboo day. It's no taxes, but we passed a tax bill, and people voted for the tax bills. People voted we increased the higher education research 1,800% in one session.
Created sales tax.
Yeah, but no member got beat for voting for the sales tax. I mean, or for taxes, because we were out selling Texas. And I don't think I got, in passing those tax bills in the House, I don't think I ever got less than 125 or 30 votes. I'd go work the floor to make sure that there was not real opposition to the tax bill, because I didn't want members getting beat for voting for tax bills. And so I wanted it to be popular on the floor of the House and be popular back in their district. So it was a different time from the standpoint that there were some issues that may have been close votes, but if you go back and look at the House journals, the 4 years I was Speaker, I would say that probably 90% of the votes, maybe 95% of the votes were not even close. It was well over 100 votes on all the things that we were doing.
Why is this job not the launch pad that it was when he was Speaker? Why is it no longer? Is this because of the term in office now, or
you get beat up after a while?
Speaker, and you run for
you guys in the press kind of like to kind of
pick on it.
Yeah, that's all you.
I think another reason, Ross, is that you still have you're elected from your individual district.
Right.
And there are 150 members out there, where the lieutenant governor is a statewide office, and I think there's a difference there. When you got to run, whether it's any of us or Speaker Strauss, they still represent one district, and I don't think they're connected as well. Right. Back to what Ben said, your question about how it's changed, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's a big difference. When I got elected, I mean, they weren't sure if I was a page or what, but I was supposed to be in the process. But the Republicans were a non-entity, and as it grew, it made a big difference. And today, probably, and this is just my vision, I think you look at it out there, and there's more where you have little groups in the House. I mean, the Republicans are divided. The Democrats are more together than the Republicans, but they're divided too.
Right? Yeah.
Right. And I think back then, the Republicans just wanted to be there, have some kind of a voice. And, when Clayton appointed me a chairman, it's the first time in 100 years a Republican had been there. I remember telling him, I said, Billy, I support you, but you're nuts. They're gonna lynch you.
Was there some noise about it?
Well, I don't remember. Do you, Pete?
No, there wasn't.
I thought there would be, but I don't remember.
He wasn't the only Republican that he pointed. He pointed several Republicans.
Yeah, he had McFarland, you, several others. Yeah.
Hutchison.
Yeah,
Ray
Hutchison. Ray Hutchison.
Did any of you, you can say now, I mean, did any of you entertain ideas of running statewide? Was there a moment, you got talked about for a couple of statewide jobs?
Yeah, but I was trying to get out. I was looking for the door out. I wouldn't want to go. No, really, if you look nationwide, there's very few speakers that have ever, gone to a higher office.
Is this modern era, or was this also true?
I think it may have been true back in the years that Barnes was in politics, but I know the three of us, we associate with a lot of other speakers around the nation through the speakers conference, and that was a question I always had. Is every state, they just don't advance more, and the reason is they get beat up after a while. The speaker represents the body, and a lot of people just don't like politicians, and they don't like the way government is. And I know in my business, I could always tell when we had a good vote or a bad vote, or that was the general public's thought, or whether it's good or bad. I'd lose business, or I'd get business. I mean, a lot of times we have good customers, and one of my salesmen would come to me and said, "Well, you lost us another customer." Well, I'm sorry, but if we're talking about the tax bill, that's always a hard vote for everybody, is a tax bill.
Right.
And but it's amazing, it has beat very few people. I used to make the statement there have been more people get beat for changing the squirrel law in East Texas than ever got beat for passing a tax bill, for voting on the tax bill.
Did you have a squirrel law? You did?
Oh, yeah.
I remember along that line, I remember Ed Howard, who and I were really close friends. He came to me and said, "I've got 2 water bills for my district. Could you carry them? Because I can't put my name on them." And so I carried them both for him.
There's my first lesson in politics was one of 3 kids, and there were 4 of us, but there were 3 of us in a pack, and it was always 2 to 1 somehow, right? It's like my little brother and sister against me and my little brother against my little sister, or her and I against my brother. And that seems to be a pretty good training ground for watching the House and the Senate and the governor. It always seems to be, it often seems to be 2 to 1 some kind of a way. Lately it's been the governor and the Senate against the House. And the folklore is that the House was sort of born with its middle finger up, and that there's a vote almost every session that I've been here where the House got its back up about something and either voted 140 to 10 against something the governor wanted, or something the Senate wanted, or to show somebody something. How much of that is baked into the pie here? How much of it is a current situation just with the politics, and how much of it is just the House is a little bit independent and a little bit, like I said, born with its middle finger up?
Well, I think right now in the speaker's race, the number one question I hear is being asked is, will you stand up and defend the House against the lieutenant governor and the governor? I mean, they want someone, every member, Democrat or Republican, I don't think it makes any difference, that'll stand up for the House. So I think that's always the case.
So your sense is that they want to stay, that it's not a pressure at the moment to, you're the one here that's still in it, that it's not a pressure at the moment to, can we get along better with the Senate? Can we get along better with the governor? It's more, can we stand independent?
I think it's both, but I think they want someone that'll stand up for them and represent their body. I think it's always been that way.
Yeah.
But I did not experience that. I don't think you did either, Pete, as far as any fight between the lieutenant governor and the governor and the speaker. We got, when I was a speaker, we got along very well. I got along very well with the lieutenant governor and the governor both, and we would meet every Monday morning and have breakfast, and we'd go over what was scheduled for the week as far as debate, and I'd bring them up to date, and the lieutenant governor would do the same. And I don't remember us having that conflict. Pete, you two guys might have seen it.
Well, I had Bullock as lieutenant
Well, I had
governor.
Bullock. Yeah. So that was the hardest thing. Let me retract some of that statement. Yeah, I had Bullock also.
but Bullock and I, we agreed right to begin with, and got along with it. There was some negotiation.
Ross, I don't know whether we realize it or not. It's hard that we're seeing what's happening in America today, and we look at what's happening in the session, and there's a speaker's race. American politics are changing, and the speaker and the House in Texas and in other states are going to become more important than ever before, and I don't necessarily think that that's what I believe should happen. But
how do you mean?
Well, in 2030, 8 states are going to have 50% of the population. 8 states, which means that the House of Representatives in the United States Congress is going to be made up of congressmen from just 8 states. Now think about the power it's going to have and what redistricting is going to have an impact on the United States more than anything else, and there's going to be bigger fights in the state legislature as far as the future political happenings in the United States, and because the state legislatures in 2021, and everybody talks about we got elected a Republican governor, a Democratic governor, they can have a lot of impact on redistricting. I'm not saying that the governors don't have impact, but I had to draw 3 different redistricting bills. They kept declaring what we were doing unconstitutional, but Lyndon Johnson was president, and one of his greatest strengths to be president was the seniority that we had in Texas. We had 6 powerful committee chairmen. Sam Rayburn had said, and he didn't say women, I apologize, he said you got to find young men and elect them young and keep them there because seniority is so important. Well, that was the basis of Johnson having so much power in the Great Society, was the George Mahons, the chairman of the appropriation. I could go down and list all of these people that ran the House, and it's going to happen again, that Texas and California and New York and Pennsylvania and Georgia and Florida, they're going to control the House of Representatives, and unless something is changed where you take the politics out of redistricting and get a bipartisan commissioners and not, it's going to be the biggest fight that in 2021 and 2023 when the state legislatures meet. I guarantee you redistricting is going to be is almost as important as FDR's declaration for us to go to enter World War II. I mean, it's going to be where politics is all about, and so there's going to have to be some very careful thought given, and you know, us being in Texas is very good because we're going to be one of the powers. But in 2040, there's going to be 11 states that are going to have 70% of the House of Representatives. And looking at this, it's going to be incredible. The power is going to be, and it's going to be the haves and have-nots.
So we're
and
going to have
America's going to become divided.
Well, at the same time, we're going to have a rural Senate, it sounds like.
Yes. Well, you look at it, you're going to have probably 60 or 70 congressmen from Texas. You're going to have 2 United States senators, but you're going to have 2 United States senators from Montana that's not going to have 1 million people. You're going to have 2 from North and South Dakota that are not going to have over 1.5 million people. It's going to be the dynamics of the state legislature because of redistricting, and the dynamics of politics period in the United States are going to have a real dramatic different direction.
Mr. Craddick, is this a conversation now in the House?
I think there's a lot of conversation because looking at redistricting, people are already talking about it. But you know, it might be one interesting thing that'll happen with Ben's, his philosophy, and I'm sure that's right, is we may see congressmen down here in Texas more than once every 10 years.
They do have a tendency to show up during redistricting.
From a personal standpoint, Governor Barnes did the redistricting in 1971 and created me a district to win in.
Dylan Jones remembered you all the way to the end.
That's right.
So one of the things that seems to be a component increasingly in speakers' races from here all the way to here is the influence, or maybe more accurately, the attempted influence of outside groups. You know, in some ways, this is, you know, somebody compared this to a race for class president in high school only with money, which is a, you know, interesting way to look at it. When you're talking to people, you know, the one view of this, sort of the civics textbook view of this, is it's purely a matter of the 150 members of the House choosing a leader from among their members, and the, you know, the strings swell and the clouds part and everything, you know, sings. There's a bunch of groups outside who care a lot about who the speaker is, and they seem to have more aggressively tried to assert themselves as time has gone on. Is that just my perception? Has it always been the
Well,
thing?
it started several years ago when you used to have all the lobby groups were association types.
Right.
And then a guy that's in this room right now started a lobby group to take on a whole bunch of clients.
Right. Fellow without a tie.
Yeah, without time, he got socks. I don't know where you keep his socks on or not.
I just wonder.
But
I
he's
mean,
sitting right back there.
was it always outside groups? I mean, I know in the '60s there were 3 or 4 big associations that you had to check this box, but I don't know that that was the determinant in a speaker's race.
No, I don't think it was. First of all, money was different then, as far as there were not limitations, but I probably spent running for state representative in 1960 from De Leon and Brownwood. I think I spent about $3,000. And
probably a lot of money in
and,
those days,
and,
right?
and running for speaker, I probably spent maybe $100,000. Running for lieutenant governor, it's unbelievable. 30 million, 25 million, 30 million. I spent less than $1 million getting elected lieutenant governor.
Right.
I spent about $300,000 or $400,000 running for governor. Things were different in money, and this may get me. I'll probably have to get a cab back, so probably won't anybody give me a ride. But if we don't do something about the fact that unlimited dark money can continue to flow into politics, our system is going to change, and I don't think it's going to change for the good. I think that the Supreme Court has been very clear that you can't put limitations on money that's given. But I want the law to be where that a candidate has to go file within 48 hours or 72 hours who he gets his every campaign contribution has to be disclosed. If XYZ Corporation can put corporate money into a PAC of $3 or $4 million, that's fine. But that's the law. That's the law of the land. But I want that reported where the people of Texas or these other states can see that money went in. It's unbelievable that money can go in and not ever have to be reported today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's the way our founding fathers determined this system should be. But it is unbelievable. I think maybe in some Senate races this year, United States Senate races, and maybe the one here, I heard an unbelievable number that's been raised this last quarter in our United States Senate race here. But when you're raising $25 or $30 million a quarter in a Senate race, it's unbelievable the impact that money is having. And I don't keep up with the Texas legislature like I do. I see in the newspapers where in some of these urban districts, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, some of these urban districts, people are spending $1 million to get elected state representative. They're certainly spending $1 million to get elected to the Texas Senate. And I don't think that's what the founders of the Texas Constitution meant when our legislatures to meet 140 days every other year. I don't think they had in mind it's going to be $1 million raise.
Does it change the way people vote for speaker as you guys were coming up? I mean, you were all in long enough to see sort of races at the beginning of your term and races at the end of your term, whether you were in those races or not. Did the nature of how people vote change?
I don't know that it does, but I think you have, as Ben mentioned, and Pete mentioned too, but I think you've got a larger number of people by far out there as lobbyists or representing different groups, and they're all trying to have input where, like you said, there used to be major associations, even probably when you were speaker, there were just a limited number. And when I was there, there are more and more people, and so I think that's the factor.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it really makes a difference whether Group A is for Joe or John. Maybe I'm wrong. I just don't think they do.
It makes a difference because of the money they get from those groups, and that's what Governor Barnes talking about. That it's how my first race was $8,000.
Yeah.
And my speaker's race wasn't at all what probably is going to be spent on the speaker's race now.
Right.
I bet I didn't spend $10,000 on my speaker's race.
And we had it limited at one time on taking contributions, but that got sidetracked somewhere.
So what are members looking for? I mean, there's a Speaker of the House is, there's partly, and this again is an outsider view, but it looks like, I want somebody who's going to let me do what I want to do as a member within certain limits. You understand that. But you also, there's the quieter part of this is there's something of a protection racket.
That's right.
Don't make me vote on this. Don't make me vote on that.
I think that's right. I think they want someone that is one, going to let them vote their district, which
Right.
is always
That's the key right there.
factor.
That's it.
And I think they want someone that's going to keep them from taking votes on things that they don't want to take a vote on, or the push, and let them, like I said, vote their district. And I think they want someone who will protect the body, the House. That's, to me, I think, is a major thing.
How do you convince them you're going to do that? I mean, don't they look at every candidate in a race and say, you know,
Well,
I think he's beholden to them, and I think he's beholden to those others, and, you know, go down the line like that?
That's what is a key factor in running for speaker.
Right.
Is you talk to each individual, and you let them know they're going to have a voice in the system.
Right.
And that's what they want. They want to. Number one is Speaker just said is they want to represent their district, and I know when I was speaker, of course everybody wants to have a one-on-one with the speaker, and so they'd come in and ask me what I wanted out of them. I said, well, the first thing I want out of it is to support the people in your district,
Right.
and let me know what I can do to help. And I did that same thing when I ran for speaker. I said, you're going to have a voice in the system. I'm going to make sure you do have a voice in the system, and you represent your district. And I said, I won't be hollering at you, twisting your arm to do anything like that. I said, but you do that. And I said, there's going to be some hard votes that I'm going to need you to help, and I'll talk to you personally about it and see if it's going to have any impact when you get reelected. Mm-hmm. And that's the main thing they want. They want somebody. Because my viewpoint as a speaker was just keep the train on the track and make sure that it goes smoothly. Everybody's happy, and you get the key issues. You don't want to get into a big fight where you got one group over here against this group over here just because of the policy of it. I mean, it's not if it's sound government or what. It's just you got different ideas about. I'm against this because he's for it. Yeah.
The late great Sam Kinch told me one time that the job of a speaker or a lieutenant governor is to make sure that the number of, he didn't say it this way, but the number of angry members was smaller than a majority at all times. So what's the worst part of the job? If you were writing a note to the candidates who are running for speaker this time, in any house, but in the Texas House, what would you say is the worst part of the job? What would you say is the best part of the job? I've heard speakers say, this is fun to run the House, but I can't pass my own bills anymore. And everybody gets into a jam here and there, and I just wonder what's the up and down of this job. Anybody can jump into that. Wouldn't you love to know what flashed through their mind?
You want the ups? I think. Well, the ups is you have an opportunity to do things that you think ought to be done for the state, and as far as changes made or whatever, you have the speaker has a big impact on it. I mean, because the speaker can, if he wants to, he can delay or kill any piece of legislation that's out there, but it gives you a chance that you can promote your ideas a little better than you would as a normal chairman.
You always used to tell us it was all up to the members.
Well, it is. It is up to the members. Absolutely. But
Ross, I think one thing is this. I think the hardest part is you've got all these members. You want them to vote their district. They want to vote their district. And then there comes a school finance bill or appropriations bill or whatever, a key deal. And then you got to herd those cats together and make sure you've got 76 votes to pass it or whatever. And so I think that's the hardest part that you've got is as Gib mentioned earlier, you got to ask somebody for a vote.
Isn't in some ways, I mean, you guys are all in politics. I mean, isn't in some ways that the best part? I mean, you're down there, wrestling over votes, and isn't that kind of the thrill of it? Or is that?
Well, that's part of it. It's a challenge because you never want to put a bill on the House floor that won't pass. Right. And so
I still count votes.
Huh?
I still count.
Do. Yeah, that's it. You count the votes. I mean, so your key members. That's their responsibility is bring the list of their members of their committee on how they're going to vote on the issue, especially a tax bill.
Right.
And
we don't have that problem anymore. They don't count votes. We don't have one.
but anyhow, but that's the key is making sure that you got the votes. In fact, what I would do when I was speaker, you always got members want to pass a bill. It might be controversial. I said, all right. I said, bring me 80 names. Bring me 80 votes for the bill. And I said, if you bring me 80 votes, I'll sketch it for the floor. And once I established that, that cut that off quite a bit. And,
Mr. Laney, worst part of the job?
I don't know where, I'd hate to say that you've got the worst part.
Yeah.
Because it's probably the best job there is in state government. Because you represent your district, and then you represent 149 other districts too. So if you do it right, it's enjoyable.
What's the hardest part?
Hardest part is being able to represent your district and still be a semi-statewide issue person on statewide issues.
Right. Got a theory on this?
Well, you know, and I compliment all three of the fellows that I'm up here with and their tenured speakers, because they all provided leadership and were part of a lot of good things in Texas. Obviously, the upside is unbelievable. I mean, the opportunity not only to represent your district, but the opportunity to provide leadership in the House, and for the House to be a part of things that are happening in Texas, to drive by University of Texas at Odessa, or to go to Lubbock and think about a law school, and to think about a medical school, to go down to MD Anderson and think about that when I was first speaker that there were, and this is not what I did, but it's what the state did, but you know, 80% of the children were dying with leukemia. Now, MD Anderson now is curing about 70 to 80% of leukemia. The kids are living, and it's because a lot of this is because state government did this. There's some people that have got water on their farms that are being able to go agriculture because of things the Texas legislature did. The things that the most difficult part of the job is convincing people that we're number 2 in population, and we've got a lot more responsibility at the state level than what we had, and the federal government is not doing what it once did. That when I was in office, the state's got to do more, but it's the greatest opportunity in the world to be a part of state government that's doing things for these 30 million citizens and improving the way of life here and improving education. People are getting college degrees. People are going to vocational technical training. People are making more money today, and they're providing for their families. All of this thing is when you get back, and maybe it comes with age when you start trying to get reflective of where you've been in life. But the Speaker of the House's job is a great job because it's got power. And if you use that power in the right way, let the members represent their districts, protect your friends, and make sure that if they want to come back, if they want to continue to work, they do it. But it's the hard job is finding the money with which to do this, and also working with all 149 members. And I hate to see the partisanship that's found its way in the Texas House, that's found its way into Congress. I thought that committee hearing yesterday was one of the saddest days that I've ever seen in my life. Matter of fact, it's almost like 9/11. I wanted to turn the television off and go to bed last night and just not believe it. But that's why that we can do better in the United States. We can really do better in Texas, and we've been doing better because of these three guys that are up here, because they were decent, honorable speakers who recognized their responsibility as leaders.
Okay. With that, I'm going to throw you to the lions here. We got a couple of mics, I guess, running around. If you'll raise your hand if you've got a question. There's one over here. The mic is always on the opposite side of the room from the person who wants to ask a question. That's how that works. Say who you are and...
My name is Fritz Reinig, and this kind of ties in with your question, Ross, as far as the ups and downs of the office, and I'm sure there are 50 different answers for the one question. It's kind of broad, but when you took the gavel as speaker, each of you, were there any aspects of the job that came as a complete surprise to you or that you did not anticipate?
Well, I can answer that to some extent. That, yeah, the first 30 days that being a speaker is the toughest 30 days you ever spend in your life, because you have such a great responsibility making all the committee assignments, and you got guidelines you have to follow as far as making those assignments, and it kind of goes in with the downside is the time required to be speaker. I mean, it consumes you totally, and that's why I'm saying, you know, after 3 terms, you know, I was wore out. I'll be honest with you. I mean, the last 2 terms I spent as speaker, I should not have really. I looked back and I said, you know, I should have just retired after 3 terms, because you lose the fire in your belly after a while, and it becomes a job. And the reason it becomes a job is the requirement, because, you know, you're somewhere almost every night. You know, I was on a plane probably half the year going to fundraisers for certain members or whatever. You never sleep in your own bed to any degree, and that 30 days getting prepared for the session, making the committee assignments, and going through the learning process, because there's no way you can really prepare to be speaker ahead of time. These guys might give you a better.
I think that's right. I think it's a tough situation. It's one of the biggest joys of my life. There's no doubt about it. I loved it, but I think it's a tough situation. You spend a lot of hours per day doing it, and the members go home generally on Thursday for the first several months.
Mm-hmm.
As speaker, you don't, and I think that's something you have to be aware of it. I've had several people say to me, "Well, did you go home and work on the weekends?" No, you know, it didn't work that way. You know, the members, a lot of them go home, obviously, and whatever their careers are, they do that on the weekend to exist. And I don't think, in today's world, I don't think that's available to you.
Okay, got another one? All over the place. Somebody with a microphone, hand it to.
Hi, Jim Henson from up the street.
Jim's got one, great.
You know, you've all talked in various ways about the fundamental role of the speaker being to represent the body, to enable the members to represent their districts. Then we've also talked, you know, and that's been the defining kind of internal dynamic for speakers. Ross also mentioned the outside changes of money. I think one thing that I didn't hear come up was also the increased media attention through changes in the media and social media to what the speaker does and the selection of the speaker. I think we always attribute to Mr. Laney the point that Ross has used in columns. I've used it that, you know, once you get too well known, you know, your days are kind of numbered. Are all these outside changes really eroding that internal role? Do you guys expect that this is the old role of the speaker is going to be fundamentally changed by these outside changes?
Is it harder to keep it in the room?
Well, I think there's something that's changing, and I may have to give you and Ross equal time, but I think the press has got a bigger responsibility than they're meeting right now, and I understand what's happened about the internet and about new ways of communication, but I think that the legislature acted and performed a little better for the people that live in Texas when we had a different kind of press coverage, and that shows I'm old and I don't understand that about the blogs that everybody reads and the instant communication. But when I was chairman of the Rules Committee, and everybody moved out of the Capitol, the Agriculture Commissioner, the Controller, we built some new state buildings, and so it's my responsibility to build offices for the press. And so we built space for the press, and there were 85 members of the Capitol Press. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a very healthy situation. There was a Fort Worth Star-Telegram and a Fort Worth Press. There was a Dallas Morning News and a Dallas Times-Herald. There was a San Antonio Light and a San Antonio Express, a Houston Chronicle and a Houston Post. Right. And if the Post didn't write something bad if you'd screwed up, the Chronicle damn sure caught it the next day. And I think a bigger spotlight and a bigger magnifying glass and more press people working and doing their jobs. And I understand the hard times that newspapers have gone through financially. But, you know, finally the Washington Post and the New York Times, and I'm sure they're not very popular with people in this room, but they now have, the Washington Post has hired 45 new investigative reporters, and the New York Times has beefed it. If we don't have, there's got to be, you can't play football or soccer or baseball without an umpire or a referee. Now the press has to inform the people of Texas what's going on, but I believe it's a better state legislature and people are better speakers, and they're better lieutenant governors, and they're better representatives and senators when the press is there and the government's all out in the open and people know what's going on.
I'm going to call this guy the next time the Tribune has a fundraiser, I think.
Look, can I just cover up a little bit? I want to cover it a little more. The press has changed.
Right.
When I first became a member, I remember many times going out and have dinner with members of the old Corps press. I guess,
Right.
you know, back when the Speaker Barnes or Governor Barnes was speaking about, and you would tell them what's going on.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, these guys retired, and you had a new group that came in that had gotcha stories, you know. And I used to have a press conference at the end of every session, and the reason I did it was try to lay out what happened that day and what's going to happen the next day, and I tried to be real open about it. And I'd read the paper the next day, and that's why I quit reading the paper after a while. And I said, you know, what kind of dope was that guy smoking last night when he wrote that story? Because it was completely off board. And then what also happened, and I think it's what happened on some of the leaks we have in Washington and everywhere else, is that it's an easy way to get at somebody. And we had that happen. I know when I was speaker all the time, is if somebody was mad at me, they knew who to call. There were about 3 reporters that they could call, and they would write a negative story about you, and they would call you and ask you, said, is this right or wrong? I said, no, it's wrong. But they'd say, well, he denied it. I mean, they run the story, but it was just, he denied it.
Right.
And I think there's a whole lot of that was going on. It might still be going on. I don't read the paper, so I don't know.
You know, Ross, what Ben mentioned is, it's interesting because if you go to the House floor today,
right,
and you look over in the press box, if there are people there, there may be 1 or 2 where it used to be full.
Yeah.
Right, I think exactly what Gibb was saying. You know, he did a press conference at the end, or at least talked to him. So did I, and Pete, I guess, did too. But there's nobody to talk to. You get 2 or 3 that are looking at one issue. That's all they're there for, to write this story. It's not like it was, and I think, Ben, you're right.
Good question here.
Yeah, my name's Mark Spangler. You mentioned you appointed your opponent to committee chair. Is the idea of retaliation from the speaker more Texas myth than actual Texas reality, or is that an institutional quality?
Careful how you answered this. I watched some of this.
Well, first of all, let me say this, throw this out, and then we can go to Pete since he said that. It's his responsibility. I think this is correct. I believe Texas is the only legislature in the country that has Republican and Democrat chairmen. I think that's still true. So you have a real different mixture here than you have in any other state. And so people say, well, don't appoint this one or that one because they're a different party. That just doesn't exist here.
Yeah. Mr. Laney, you want a word on that?
Well, not really.
Awful quiet over there. We got time for one more question. Right over here.
Todd Kirchwell with the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of Texas. Gentlemen, I'm not smart enough to come up with some thought-provoking question, but as somebody that came to the legislature in the 90s, each of you are icons. Governor Barnes, you and I have had the chance to visit from time to time. Speaker Laney, you've taken me under your wing and taught me so much. Speaker Craddick, I thought my whole world was over when we didn't pass the Parks bill. You picked up the phone personally and called. Speaker Lewis, you have sat me down in the Capitol and explained the way it was for so many years. I hope that people listening to this recognize what each of you have done for the state of Texas. You know, these taglines about...
Can you get to a question?
Yeah.
Yes. How?
I'm liking what he's saying.
Which one of you slipped him a 20?
How can we somehow take the ways of the past that y'all led under and educate these new groups coming in? Because it's never going to go back to the old ways, but I think there's a piece of history that can help guide the future. What role do y'all think y'all can play going forward?
Quickly.
Well, I can answer a little bit of it, I think, because when I was speaker, what I would do is the first week of the session, I would always have a meeting with all the freshman members that was coming in, and just give them an overview of what to expect of, of them. And that was part of it, is working with your colleagues and knowing that, sometimes you're not going to be able to agree. But I've seen guys get in bitter fights, as we all have, on the floor, just hollering and almost cussing each other, and go out and have dinner that night. I mean, so that's what you've got to get that system back together, where you can disagree, but at the same time, you know that you're there for a purpose, and that's what's better for the state. And I would always give an overview of what was expected of each member, for them to be aggressive and at the same time be progressive, as far as getting what their constituents wanted them to do.
I would love to keep going. I think we could do a semester-long college class with these four, but we're out of time. Can you guys give a big hand to Ben Barnes, Pete Laney, Don Craddick, Jim Lewis? Thank you, guys. Thanks.
All right. Oh, thank you. Good job. Worked great.